It's the bull's last stand, or at least that's what this week seems to be having in store for us as we do continue on the overall boring sideways range for Bitcoin. But I do expect that there will be some small volatility this week, followed by resolutions in early-ish February. So probably still another couple weeks to go as we do analyze this. But it's going to be very, 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 very tight here, very, very nuanced. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it, starting off right in over here with a revisiting of the daily statistics. So Monday is actually a very interesting day, because if we do look at only Mondays, starting from the time when CME futures went live, which was basically the beginning of 2018. Yeah, it was a few days before that, but fair enough. About 2018 to current times, Monday is actually the most likely day to close positively for Bitcoin. If we were to look at all of Bitcoin's daily closures, however, throughout its full history, that day would actually be Tuesday. But since then, Monday has certainly been it. Maybe that has something to do with Bitcoin's acceptance within the traditional market landscape, but ultimately it has seen an average return of 40% on those positive closing days and has lost about the same amount on the negative closing days. But it does have a higher probability to close to the upside on a day like today. And if we were to look at the open and add about 40% to the upside, where would that put Bitcoin? That would put Bitcoin at 42,600. And if we were to shave off the same percentage to the downside, that'd put Bitcoin basically around the current lows of this range, which is 40,600. So nice little thousand or a couple $1,000 range right there. And realistically, what does that align with? Well, in this case, as Bitcoin is essentially at the bottom side of the current range, I do still think that Bitcoin is a lot more likely to bounce here. Yes, this has been essentially the same analysis for the past 4 to 5 days now, but ultimately it's taken its time. And really, we are just seeing the next sort of puzzle pieces kind of being, well, I guess, shoved into place as this continues on. So this really just strengthens the overall analysis that in this current trajectory for Bitcoin, yes, overall still more likely to break down over time, but in the more near term, no, it is not. This is probably going to be a fake out here as Bitcoin does hang on to the range lows. It's more likely to rally from here. It's more likely to try for a rally from here. Doesn't mean that's always going to be right, but that in combination with the setup that we have seen over here with the daily HPDRO reads getting below 80 percentile or more, sorry, not percentile, but just 80, those, well, again, are accompanied by a higher probability to bounce to the upside. So this particular setup we visited over the weekend, but you know, especially now that Bitcoin has an ETF trading on traditional market time schedules, we're unlikely to see real moves over the weekend. Like, it's probably just going to continue to get more and more boring there. Not that it even was that exciting before, although you see the breakout or breakdown every once in a while on the weekend, but very, very rare. In this case, if we reference this setup again with HPDRO levels getting down to about -80, and I actually added another condition where the HPDRV here, this indicator representing volatility, has to be above 50 and also have a positive slope. Well, that has actually spit out these statistics throughout the full history of Bitcoin of having a almost 60% probability to bounce to the upside first. But it is a short-lived bounce, typically speaking, and over 172 closed trades, that has led to an average move on the winning side of just under 7%, and on the losing side, just around 6.5%, done over the course of, on average, about 2 days. But again, seeing as this one just lived over the weekend, we can probably say that, you know, today is really the second day. And again, that is an average. You know, some reads are going to be a little bit more, some reads are going to be a little bit less. In this case, I suspect it's probably going to take, you know, another couple days actually. But looking at it right here, it fired off pretty much around where Bitcoin's trading today, 41,290 on the index. And that would imply that Bitcoin has a higher probability of bouncing to the upside again, a little bit closer to 60%, 59.30 if you want to be super exact. And again, going back on over here, Mondays at 64.5% with a 40% bounce, you know, implied today would be a good start for that. So if we are going to see this play out, I would say that today you're probably going to see Bitcoin try for a little bit of a bounce, maybe around today's closure leading into tomorrow. But ultimately, we expect this to play out really within the next few days here, and sooner rather than later. For what it's worth, the criteria measured for this one was either a 5% closing move to the upside or a 5% closing move to the downside. So that does give us a range to the upside at 43,350 and to the downside at 39,230. So if Bitcoin does come down, it even just trades below, it doesn't have to close below, but trades below 39,230, this will be wrong. And I guess at that point, you know, you probably have to look for Bitcoin to break down. I think that's a lot less likely here. Again, I know it sounded like a bit of a broken record, but I do think it's important to repeat these things, especially as, you know, very little has changed, and we're really just seeing, you know, more and more validation of this model likely to play out. But in this case, again, validated. I mean, it's valid as long as Bitcoin's above the failure point, with a range of sort of returns that we'd expect for this between the proverbial 5% take profit region, which is 43,350 again, between there and almost a 7% move from the open, which would put Bitcoin around 44,250. So yeah, I still think that this week, very likely Bitcoin does try for a bounce somewhere between like 43,350 and 44,250, let's say. But again, bounce is implied just to be a bounce. As long as Bitcoin's below 46,500, downside is the very likely resolution coming into middle, maybe end of February. So when we go over here and we reference the daily HPDR, we can see again, Bitcoin's coming off the bottom side of the blue 50% of historic returns range. This is coming on rising volatility actually, but ultimately, you know, it's more likely to bounce here just one more time. You know, very likely something like this. Bounce, blip. Oh, I guess I already have it in there because I've done this so many fucking times now. But with the way that the weekly closed last night, several things have happened. One over here. Weekly time frame, weekly RSI, bearish divergence, and a bit of a head and shoulders. I guess we already put this one in right here. Left herp, head, double right derp over here. Same thing on spot price action now too, but a little bit less obvious. The RSI testing the edge of the bullish control zone, very likely to bounce there, but it's very likely to break down from there as well. Even with the weekly Joule also getting not necessarily a downside signal, but, you know, is a corrective signal nonetheless. So what does that imply? It implies that any sort of upside move in the near term is likely to be short-lived. Again, these are all, you know, likelihoods here, not certainties, but the more and more that this goes on, the more and more that this looks like this model will very likely play out. What else do we want to go over? Yes. Okay. So something new here. All right. So we have seen some volatility versus stochastic momentum setups, especially on the 2-day time frame in the past few months, but we have not seen it on the 5-day time frame since basically September breakout, which did give us the bias for a major upside move starting in late September to our current highs. We are once again seeing volatility getting crunched on the 5-day time frame, and it is now officially back into extreme lows. So when it's back into extreme lows, that does mean that we're probably going to see a base here for a while, which implies we're probably not going to see a breakdown, or very unlikely a breakout as well, but we're probably not going to see a breakdown anytime soon as well. Like, this is going to take at least another few periods. So again, that takes us into like middle of February probably before this thing actually does move outside of the overall range. But as of right now, and as long as the 5-day stochastic also is positioned to the downside, a downside resolution is going to be much more likely. And currently the pivot is $47,000. So again, we've seen these setups play out many times. Well, maybe not many times, but we've seen them play out, you know, about 3 times in the past year. There was 1, 2, 3 big ones right there. Sorry, 4 big ones right there. And then in 2022, there's actually several that played out. That was giving us major downside biases. And this one has a very high probability to play out in whatever direction that the stochastic oscillator is positioned. But seeing as we're just starting to see extreme lows on BBWP right here, it's probably gonna take a while. We really want to see the moving average start to catch up and get into extreme lows as well, stay a little bit there, and then boom, big move. And that correlates probably with the big move on price action as well. So again, as long as the 5-day stochastic oscillator is positioned to the downside resolution from this overall formation here is more likely. 47,000 bucks is the pivot as of right now. And well, I mean, I guess there's not much to it other than that. You know, this move, or sorry, this setup in particular, has led to an average move of, you know, in many cases, 40% or more. So I don't want to scare anyone here, but I'm curious if this would start to line up with, let's say, a $28,000 read. 40% puts Bitcoin at 29,500. So we actually are starting to get some things that point down towards there. Again, 28,000 bucks was sort of my worst case scenario based off of the long-term Fibonacci analysis for Bitcoin. You can see that on last Saturday's video, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before that. But again, now we're starting to get actual setups in that same direction as well. So this becomes more and more relevant, more and more interesting. And, you know, do we see a crash down towards those regions, assuming that this setup continues to exist, leading into maybe the end portion of February, early March, basically a little bit before the halving. Yeah, I mean, things are starting to develop now. So it's the opposite but equal setups that we saw back here to the upside and back here again to the upside in September of 2023 and December of 2022, where, you know, things were essentially setting up for a pretty major move. And we started to, you know, get geared towards that a bit in advance based off of this. So again, it's going to take its time. You can see that volatility can remain low for a very, very long time. But it's adding on to the overall analysis. So I just wanted to present this one as it does start to occur. Again, in the more near term, does Bitcoin, you know, play to bounce from here? Very likely, yes. Any bounce that fails to get above 46,500 is just that, a bounce before setting up for more prolonged downside, probably, you know, near the end, or mid to end of February starting. And that's when we can get like a real crushing move. I do understand that most of this market is looking for a top here and is looking for the market to trade to the downside. Very, very valid. That is, I guess, maybe one of the major concerns with looking at major downside from this region. But from what I see, and maybe you can corroborate this as well, because I try not to spend too much time on Twitter or crypto YouTube, but it seems to me that many people are a little bit more shallow in what they're looking for. You know, coming into this correction. You know, I see a lot of people calling out 39. I see a lot of people calling out 38, in some cases even 35 as well. But realistically, all of those would be pretty small in comparison. Yeah, you know, pretty small moves in comparison to what we have seen, especially in these pre-halving corrections, if you want to call it that. You know, but so far Bitcoin's done not even 20% to the downside. To put this into perspective, if Bitcoin were to even go to 38,000 bucks, that's, I don't want to say only a 22% move, but it is a 22% move. You know, we've seen 40% moves or more actually in all prior halvings. I guess I'll just quickly go over this right now. I don't want to make this the focus of the video or anything like that, but let's see. Do I have it readily available here? Let's see. Fundamentals halving. Come on, baby. Show it to me. Yeah. Okay, so here, all the green vertical bars represent halvings, the past halvings. Again, this correction right here, how big was it? From wick to closure, 44%. How big was this one over here? Boom and boom, 39.80%. How big was this one? I mean, this one was the big one, right? You can't even really do it on wicks because there's a black swan, but if we do it on closures, 53%. I mean, it doesn't seem that crazy now, in my opinion. And all of the prior ones, all of those prior corrections have revisited the 236 minimum, by the way, minimum. This one over here, this one over here, and this one did overshoot it right here, but on a monthly closing basis, it did close about on it. And the 236 is at 28,000 bucks, or a little bit below there actually. So I still think that that's my worst case scenario. But the major news here, if there's really any news, is that now we're starting to see a setup emerge that would actually statistically corroborate that from a completely different angle and with much more iterations as well on top of it, with a pretty high probability. Again, not a certainty, but a pretty high probability. So what am I trying to say as far as the reference to today's title? Well, this is in my opinion, this is kind of the Bulaw's last stand. If Bitcoin does trade back above 46.5 and really closes higher term timeframes above there, all of what I'm talking about right here, I think it becomes null, and upside is just, it's going to very likely scream towards the upside. I think it's very unlikely. I think it's very low probability, but that would be my condition for that. Until then, it's the Bulaw's last stand, and we'll see how high this bounce gets, if there even is a bounce at all. I do think that there will be, but assuming that this bounce fails that region, get ready for mid to end of February, because this is when it starts happening, it's going to happen fucking fast, and you're going to see a lot of people caught within that upper to mid $30,000 territory. So I want to be talking about these things in advance. I'm not trying to scare anyone out there, just showing you the statistics and probabilities based off of history, and well, probably a good place for me to be leaving off. So I'll leave things right there. I did forget to humbly request that if you do find this content valuable or meaningful, or even if you fucking hate it, please do consider subscribing. Always helps out the channel. Really, really appreciative of that. Also, some Elio Trey shout outs, definitely helping out recently as well. Damn, man. Fucking love that guy. And even better for the channel as well. So, so we'll end things right there. As always, want to wish you the best. Take care. Much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.